Chapter 1 Flash Marriage. Karen, this is my bank card and the password is 131224. You can use it to buy anything necessary. A few hours later, Karen was still thinking about what her new husband had said when he handed her a bank card in the morning. Honestly, she knew very little about her husband. Apart from the fact that his name was Kevin Kyle, she knew nothing else about him, not even who his family members were. Karen did not know where she got the courage to marry a man she had only met twice. 10 days ago, with the help of Faye Reed, her best friend, Karen met Kevin for the first time on a blind date. She had no hope. After all, she had been hurt 3 years earlier, and she no longer had the right to be critical, but to resign herself to being chosen. She was 15 minutes early on the day of the blind date. Since she didn't have any good qualities, she could only do better in other aspects, hoping to leave a good impression. If she could marry a suitable man, she could also make her parents feel at ease. The man came in on time. The man's suit and shoes were very formal, which made her feel how important he viewed this blind date, which gave her a good first impression of him. His way of greeting was also very ordinary. "Miss Karen Daly, hello, I'm Kevin Kyle." It was a very ordinary sentence, but because his voice was very magnetic, it made Karen feel unusually pleasant and have a better impression of the man than before. After a brief chat, they exchanged their phone numbers and left. Since Karen had been on many blind dates before, she did not take this blind date seriously. She thought that this blind date would end up the same as those before. Unexpectedly, she received a call from Kevin 2 days later. His voice was as polite as before. "Miss Karen, are you free tonight?" That night, Kevin invited her to an Italian restaurant for dinner. Karen didn't like the awkwardness of a blind date. They spoke very few words at the restaurant. During the meal, she felt a little nervous and she didn't eat much. Originally, she wanted to find a reason to leave early. While she was hesitating, Kevin spoke first. "Miss Karen, I have some time next Wednesday. How about we get our marriage certificate picked up then?" "What? What certificate do you want?" Karen was shocked by Kevin's words. "A marriage certificate," he repeated in a serious tone. He did not sound like he was joking at all. A marriage certificate? Karen still did not believe what she had heard. She put her hand on her thigh and pinched it hard to make sure that she was not dreaming. Then she looked at the man in front of her seriously. Kevin had a pair of thick, sword-shaped eyebrows, bright eyes, and a beautiful face. He was so eye-catching that others could spot him immediately in a crowd. His expression and attitude were solemn, and he didn't look like an impulsive person. This was only the second time they had met, but he said he wanted to marry her? Then, the man's deep magnetic voice arrived at her ears again. "I thought that you were just like me, going on a blind date with the objective to build a family, to get married and have children, and live an ordinary life." "Yes, I think so, but we have just met for the second time. Don't you think it's too fast?" Karen said. She wanted to have her own family, but she didn't expect it to be so hasty. "It is a bit too fast," Kevin continued with a calm look. "After the first meeting, I went back and thought about it for 2 days. You have given me a good feeling. I personally feel that our personalities don't clash, so I want to have a try." Karen frowned slightly and was a little unhappy. Marriage is not a trivial thing. Try? If this doesn't work out, does it mean you want to... Before she could finish, Kevin interrupted her. "Miss Karen, we are all adults. Of course, we would never yearn for a love that does not even exist. We all know what we want." Karen did not answer and continued to stare at him. On the surface, this man was calm and not flamboyant. He would be a good husband. However, could she really hand over the rest of her life to this man whom she had only met twice? Really? Seeing that she was hesitating, Kevin added, Maybe it was impatient of me to not have considered your feelings. If you think I'm suitable, you can go back and think about it. I'll wait for your call." After returning home that day, Karen had been thinking about it all night. She admitted that some of her opinions were similar to those of Kevin. For example, she also believed that there was no true love in the world. After being deeply hurt, she no longer believed that there was love in this world. After a sleepless night, Karen called Kevin early the next morning and told him that she agreed to his so-called proposal. In the afternoon, Karen brought along her passport and went to register their marriage at the city hall with Kevin. When they collected theirs and walked out of the city hall together, she had a mixed feeling. It was said that marriage is the mark of a new life for women. But now, it seemed to be just so simple. All it took was $9 for a certificate that now meant that Karen Daly legally belonged to Kevin Kyle. Karen then moved into Kevin's apartment. Kevin had behaved with chivalry that night. He took the initiative to leave the main bedroom for her to rest alone while he slept in another bedroom. Karen had never expected for Kevin to hand over his bank card to her before he went to work today. They didn't even know each other that well. How could he be so sure of giving all his property to her? "Karen, the reporters from the media are waiting inside. The directors and the new boss are coming soon. Why are you in a daze at this time?" The stern voice of the public relations manager, Emma Wilson, interrupted Karen's daydreaming. She quickly pulled back her thoughts and said with a straight face, "Manager Wilson, I'm sorry, I'll pay attention." Emma looked at Karen and said in a harsh tone, "Karen, although you're an employee from the sales department, your manager has sent you to assist with the public relations department. You'd better wake up and don't drag me down with you." Karen pursed her lips and nodded. "Manager Wilson, I was just distracted. It won't happen again." Emma looked at Karen again and then looked away. She clapped her hands and called several employees who were also responsible for the reception over. "Everyone, try our best. We must hold today's press conference smoothly. We can't afford any mistakes." While speaking, Emma glanced at every employee. Chapter 2. The Mysterious Big Boss. Yes, the employees of the Public Relations Department, who were assigned temporarily to support this reception, responded in unison. Emma's eyes finally fell on Karen again. "Karen, I heard that you are the top employee in the sales department. You will be with the new boss later and be responsible for him. You don't have to worry about other things." Karen nodded, but Madonna, another employee of the Public Relations Department, gloated and said, "Karen, if our new boss is still single, would you seize the chance to get close to him?" It was actually not easy to get close to the new boss. Everyone knew that it would be a difficult job. No one wanted to pick it up, so Karen took the job. Emma stared at Madonna with a straight face and said, "What happens today will highly affect our future. Be serious." After being scolded by Emma, no one made a sound. They took in a quiet breath and put on their best behavior. It was not Emma's fault that she was nervous. After all, this matter had come so suddenly. Just as everyone had thought that everything was finally at peace in the company, the board of directors suddenly issued a statement saying that the boss wanted to have a new person take over the business. However, this new appointed big boss was very mysterious. The heads of various departments inquired about him through various means, but they could not find any information about him. Karen was usually not nosy, but even she could not help but stretch her neck to look at the entrance, wanting to see who the big boss was. Yes, all the directors and the new boss are here," the voice of the reception staff channeled from the walkie-talkie to the other employees. Her colleagues subconsciously adjusted their clothes and stood in their positions respectfully. Karen followed closely behind Emma to welcome the mysterious boss that everyone had waited for a long time. After a few steps, a tall man in a silver gray suit walked elegantly towards the lobby, surrounded by several men in black suits. At first glance, she was stunned. In front of the crowd, the tall man in a silver gray suit was her newly married husband, Kevin Kyle. Impossible! Karen thought that it was an illusion. She immediately closed her eyes and shook her head. But when she opened her eyes and looked again, the man's appearance did not change. If it were someone else, she could have made a mistake. But this was her new husband. She couldn't be wrong. His features were as sharp as a knife, and his height was exactly at 1.88 meters. He had a strong build and walked with a discreet air of elegance. No matter what this man did, he was perfectly the same as her new husband. Kevin? Karen stared at the man and subconsciously called out his name. When he heard her voice, the man's gaze shifted to her. Looking at his eyes, Karen felt so nervous that she almost forgot to breathe. She would never think that her ordinary newly married husband would become her company's new boss. She looked at him with her head buzzing. She felt as if she might explode. The man's gaze lingered on her for a moment, and then moved away as if he didn't know her at all. After what he just did, Karen's heart sank rapidly. He was obviously Kevin Kyle, her new husband. Why did he look at her with such indifferent eyes? After a while, various thoughts flashed through her mind. The most possible scenario was that she was dreaming. It was an unrealistic dream. Kevin had always been gentle and patient. He spoke and did things politely. He would never pretend that he didn't know her. She pinched herself hard and twitched her mouth in pain, only to find that this was not a dream at all. Since it was not a dream, there was another possibility. This man might have the same face as Kevin did, but he might be a completely different person. Emma pulled Karen aside and scolded her in a low voice. "Karen, do you know what kind of an occasion is this? What the hell are you doing?" Karen Daly was a little annoyed, as if she was rudely awakened from a dream. Emma whispered again, "Hurry and keep up." Karen nodded and quickly followed the new boss. She had concealed her emotions and faced the big boss, who looked exactly like her new husband professionally. Emma quickened her pace and caught up with the new boss and the others. She pushed open the door of the banquet hall for the reporters and said, "Let's all welcome the directors and our new boss." As Emma's voice fell, there was fierce applause in the conference hall. Everyone stared at the entrance, waiting for the mysterious big boss to show up. Karen gasped quietly and followed closely behind the big boss. After the big boss was seated, she quickly handed over some documents. Even though she had professional training, the fact that the company's new boss was actually her new husband still shocked her too much. She trembled, and 2 pieces of paper from the documents in her hand fell to the ground. Karen was about to bend down to pick up the files, but Kevin picked them up before she did. Then he whispered in her ear, "Wait for me at home tonight." If Kevin had not said these words, Karen would still treat him as a man who only looked exactly like her husband. As soon as he said this, Karen was mind blown. She was dumbfounded and forgot what to do. Fortunately, the reporter's attention was not on her, so she had some time to adjust her emotions. The reporters did not notice her. However, the sharp-eyed employees of the Public Relations Department did not miss this little episode. The Public Relations Department was well prepared for the event, and all other departments cooperated well. Kevin was charismatic enough to take on the press, so the conference went very well. As soon as the new boss and the other directors left, Madonna rushed over and said, "Karen, the way you accidentally dropped the documents just now was great. You successfully attracted our new boss's attention." Karen frowned slightly. She turned to Emma and said, "Manager Wilson, I'll go back to the sales department after finishing my work here." Looking at Karen turn away from her, Madonna was so angry that she stomped her feet. She ignored me. She just ignored me. Why is she so arrogant? Emma glared at Madonna and said, "Don't just stir up trouble all day long. If you continue to make trouble, you will be the next one to leave. If you're capable enough, just do your job well. As long as you climb to a higher position than she does, you will be qualified to be as arrogant as well." Madonna glared at Karen's back as she walked away. She gritted her teeth and replied, "Understood, cousin." Chapter 3. Life After Marriage. Karen returned to the sales department office and heard her colleagues discussing the new boss. Everyone had something to say, as if they knew the new boss very well. When her colleague May Lily saw her, she hurried over and said, "Karen, you're so lucky to be the first one working side by side with a boss." Karen smiled faintly and said, "It's all just work. Even though we were side by side, it's still just work. If you think you can work well with the boss, you can ask our manager to send you to work for the boss in the future." May quickly waved her hand and said, "Although our new boss is handsome and charming, I don't have the guts to approach him, given his eyes and charisma. The new boss will be coming over for a routine inspection. Go back to your positions and do what you're supposed to." Sonny Olson, the manager of the sales department, walked into the office, reprimanding his subordinates. The new boss was coming to inspect. Hearing this news, Karen could not help but gulp in fear. She was so nervous that her heart was about to jump out of her throat. She still needed some time to digest the fact that her new husband, Kevin, was the company's new boss. She was not ready to face him for a while. The other colleagues all returned to their seats except for Karen, who was still standing there in a daze. Sonny looked at Karen and asked, "Karen, don't you have anything else to do?" I'm fine." Karen came to her senses and quietly clenched her fists. She quickly returned to her seat and turned on the computer to check a client's information. After a while, the elevator bell rang, and Kevin, surrounded by a group of people, appeared before Karen again. Fortunately, Kevin just came to say a quick hello to the employees of the department. After listening to Sonny's quick report, he led the group of people away. After Kevin left, the department became noisy again. Even Sonny, who was usually very serious, could not help but gossip along with everyone. The only topic they talked about was whether this handsome boss was unmarried or married. Karen listened to their discussions and did not say anything. She was thinking if this group of women had known that her name was written as his spouse on the boss's marriage certificate, would she be skinned alive by them? This tense workday had finally passed. Karen packed up to leave after all her coworkers had already left. When she finished her work during the day, what kind of mentality should she have to face Kevin at night? Karen really didn't know what to do. She didn't even know if she could go back to her home with Kevin. Outside the building, Karen habitually turned to the right towards entrance B of the subway. After walking for a while, she remembered that she was now living with her new husband. Kevin's apartment was not too far from Tech Valley. 3 stops by bus, about half an hour by foot would get her there. Karen looked at the time. It was only 5 o'clock now. Anyway, she hadn't figured out how to face Kevin, so she chose to walk home. She could slowly think about what had happened between them. Down the valley, Karen decided to buy some vegetables and meat from the fresh supermarket nearby. No matter how big one's problems were, filling one's stomach was still the first priority. She didn't know what Kevin liked to eat, so she took out her phone and wanted to call him to ask. But she was worried that it was not convenient for him to answer the phone, so she put it back in her bag. After picking up the ingredients, she took them home. As she approached the apartment's elevator, she saw a familiar figure. He was facing the elevator and standing very straight. He wore a light gray suit. Kevin's figure was very well built. From afar, he seemed so good looking. Karen still didn't understand why would such an outstanding man who was the boss of a big company go on a blind date, or that she was the lucky girl who was chosen. "You're back." Karen walked over and tried to greet him casually. "Yes." Kevin looked back at her. He didn't change his expression. He was still a little indifferent. Karen gave him a faint smile and stood beside him. She glanced at him and felt that he seemed to be a little different today. She couldn't figure out what exactly was different. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. It turned out that he wore a pair of glasses today, with a golden frame. It made him look calm and more restrained. Karen sighed silently in her heart. This man had again only spoken a few words when meeting her today. He was usually very soft-spoken. She didn't know what to do. She wanted to bridge the gap between them. Now that she knew his shocking true identity, she didn't know how to approach him. While she was thinking about this, Kevin suddenly stretched out a hand towards her, but she took a small step back subconsciously to keep a distance from him. "I'll carry those for you," he said calmly. He was not angry, although she had kept her distance. Instead, he casually took the bag in his hand. Karen felt her face burning hot. He had just wanted to help her carry the bag, but she was thinking too much. She looked down at Kevin's strong arm, carrying the large bag effortlessly. A warm feeling hit her heart. She thought optimistically, even if there is no love, even if he is the boss of the company, as long as the two of them could devote themselves to managing this marriage, it would be fine. The two of them entered the elevator, and no one said a word during the trip up the elevator. After returning home, Kevin put the things in the kitchen and said lightly, "I don't know how to cook. I'll have to trouble you tonight." "You can do your work. Leave the cooking to me." Karen put the bag away, took off her coat, and put on her apron. "Thank you," he said lightly. "You're too polite." Karen forced a smile, which felt a little awkward. They were already husband and wife, but the way they got along felt like two strangers. She felt that it was reasonable for a wife to cook for her husband, but his way of talking to her created a distance between them. She thought that even if their marriage was not based on love, their interaction shouldn't be that distant. She didn't think much about it anymore. She turned around and went to the kitchen. She quickly washed the rice and put it into the pot. Then she sorted out the vegetables and washed them. After a while, from the corner of Karen's eyes, she saw a tall figure standing at the door of the kitchen. She turned back and asked, "What's the matter?" "If you need any help, please tell me." Kevin stood rigidly. His tone was still calm, but it sounded a little distressed. "Wait a minute, I'll be done soon." Karen poked her head out and looked at the clock hanging on the wall in the living room. It was already 7:30 p.m. and he might be starving. She thought to herself, "I must come back quickly after work tomorrow. I should make the dishes earlier so that he can eat straight away when he comes home." No matter who Kevin was, this marriage was her own choice. She must try her best to make it good. Chapter 4. Breaking up shouldn't be the easy option. Kevin moved his thin lips, but said nothing. His eyes showed a hint of incomprehensible depth beneath the golden glasses. He stared at Karen's back and thought for a few seconds. Then he turned and walked to the study room. In the past 3 years, Karen had rented a room for herself and lived alone. She was very good at making some home-cooked dishes. Soon, 2 dishes and soup were served on the table. "Kevin, it's time to eat." Karen knocked on the door of the study room carefully and gently pushed the door open when she did not hear a reply. Kevin was making a phone call in the study. He said, "Take care of these things. You don't have to report everything to me." After that, he hung up the phone immediately. The moment he looked up, he met Karen's eyes and asked coldly, "What's the matter?" "Time to eat." Karen smiled and did not dare to look at him. "I'll be there in a second." His tone was indifferent as usual. The two of them sat opposite each other, eating their meal tensely. Neither of them spoke to break the silence. For a moment, the atmosphere seemed to be extremely boring. Karen moved her lips several times to find some topics to talk about, but she swallowed back her words after seeing Kevin's indifferent expression. After dinner, Kevin offered to wash dishes for her, and Karen did not refuse. Since he was willing to share the burden of these chores with her, she was happy to let him do so. It could be seen from Kevin's clumsiness that he had never done these things before. But it was true. It was impossible for the boss of such a big company to do such trivial things such as washing dishes. Crack. Hearing the crack of a porcelain bowl in the kitchen, Karen stood up immediately and walked over. What she saw was Kevin holding a bowl in his hand and staring blankly at the broken porcelain pieces on the ground. "Let me do it." Karen walked over and wanted to take the bowl from Kevin's hand. "No, I'll do it." Kevin stretched out his hand, and his tone did not change. "Kevin, actually..." Karen looked at Kevin's firm eyes and could not say anything. She nodded and left the kitchen to let him continue. Although they were legally a couple, Kevin was still a man that Karen was not familiar with. She wanted to know him more, to know everything about him. She was trying her best to be a good wife. However, with a personality like his, could she really get close to him like how she had planned when they had gotten married? Karen sat down in the living room, picked up the remote control, turned on the TV. She randomly put on a news channel. While watching the TV, she occasionally turned her head to look in the direction of the kitchen. Through the glass door, she saw Kevin carefully cleaning bowls and cutlery. She secretly sighed in her heart. How could a man look so good while washing dishes? Perhaps Karen's gaze was too obvious. Kevin looked back as well. Their eyes met, and Karen saw the slight coldness in Kevin's eyes, but he then let out an impeccably polite smile. Karen's face turned slightly red as she was caught looking at him, and she returned a polite smile. Karen turned her eyes back to the TV screen, thinking about Kevin. This man was so confident at work and even looked so good while washing dishes. When would she ever see him make a fool of himself? After tidying up the kitchen, Kevin returned to the hall and saw that Karen was in a daze. He stared at her delicate face and said after a few seconds, "Karen?" "Ah," Karen said as she listened to his soothing voice. She found it very pleasant. For a moment, she felt her face burning hot. Kevin sat down on the sofa beside her. "I have something to discuss with you." "Okay," Karen replied. She also wanted to have a good talk with him and take this opportunity to make things clear. Kevin's deep gaze swept up and down her, and then he slowly said, "Karen, today at the company, we'll have separate work and personal life. I understand that. In fact, I don't want to let people gossip behind our backs because of our personal relationship." Kevin had not finished yet, but Karen interrupted him. She had worked hard in this company for 3 years to have her achievements today. She wanted to continue climbing up the corporate ladder on her own. She didn't want anything to change because of Kevin. His face was calm, but his eyes flashed imperceptibly beneath his glasses. "I didn't mean to hide my identity. I did not know how you would feel about me when I saw you during the event, so I did not announce anything to the public, but I didn't mean to hide it on purpose." "I know," Karen nodded and said, "My work life and personal life are always separate. I don't want to bring my personal life to work." It was their own business that she and Kevin had gotten married. Karen felt that there was no need to announce it to the people in the company. On one hand, she did not want her job to be affected. On the other hand, she was not sure how far she could go with Kevin. Looking at Karen's firmness, Kevin paused and said, "Did you tell your family about our marriage?" Karen shook her head. She did not want to talk about her family. I have just taken over innovative tech, and I have some things to deal with in person. If you don't mind, after all pressing matters have been attended to, I would like to go with you to visit my father-in-law and mother-in-law, he said calmly, as if he had expected Karen to have mentioned this matter to her family. No, Karen refused immediately, but then felt that it was inappropriate, so she hurriedly explained, I have had some issues with my family. I haven't contacted them for a long time. Let's talk about it later. Family? Every time she thought of this word, Karen felt a dull pain in her heart. It made her a little breathless. 3 years ago, that home was no longer her home, and she could never go back. Karen? Kevin called her name in a deep voice and said, You're no longer alone, you have me. Kevin's tone was dull, but because of his pleasant voice, it carried a different feeling. This sentence was obviously not romantic, but it made Karen's heart full of inexplicable feelings. Although she gritted her teeth and had gradually overcome the pain over the years, she would still feel sad and silently shed tears while thinking of it some late nights. Karen? After a long silence, Kevin spoke again. We are already husband and wife. I sincerely want to spend the rest of my life with you. Kevin suddenly said this, and Karen was stunned again. Looking up at him, and into his sincere eyes, she also said, I'm determined to live with you for the rest of my life. Kevin stared at her beautiful face, paused for a few seconds, and said, Karen, can you promise not to break up with me no matter what happens? Yes. Karen nodded heavily. I will try my best to be a good wife. She had also thought that they should not break up so easily, and now Kevin had said so. This made her feel at ease. After chatting with Kevin, she felt much more at ease. Kevin went back to the study. Karen then cleaned up the room and went to the bathroom to take a bath. After her bath, she sat in front of the dressing table and blew her hair dry. Just when her hair had dried, Kevin came in. He also took a shower and put on a white bathrobe, revealing a small piece of supple, smooth skin on his chest. His hair was still dripping with water, which followed the lines of his body and disappearing into the white bathrobe. Karen's face suddenly blushed. You must be tired. Go to sleep early, Kevin suddenly said. His voice was low and magnetic, which made Karen's heart beat inexplicably. Kevin did not intend to leave. Did he mean to sleep in the same room tonight? Chapter 5. The Considerate New Husband. However, she felt that she was not yet ready to accept him. Thinking of this, she felt her heart beat faster, and it was difficult for her to breathe. It took her half an hour to get out of the bathroom. She found a set of long-sleeved pajamas and wrapped herself up tightly. When she returned to the room and did not see Kevin there, she could not help but sigh in relief. However, before she could breathe normally, Kevin came into the room again. There was a faint smell of smoke on his body. He had probably gone to the balcony to smoke. He did not hide his smoking, but considerately did not smoke when she was around him. Go to sleep. Kevin went towards the bed and lay on the right side of the bed, leaving the left side to Karen. Oh, okay. Karen was so nervous that her tongue was tied up and her palms were sweating. She climbed onto the bed from the other side and lay down on his left. The big bed was 2 meters wide. There was still quite a distance between them, but she just felt that his masculinity was suffocating her. I'm going to sleep now. Good night. She quickly closed her eyes, hoping that she could fall asleep in the shortest time possible. The more Karen tried to ignore it, the more she thought about it. The more she tried to sleep, the more awake she became. She wondered if Kevin would do something to her while she was asleep. But on second thought, even if Kevin really wanted to do something to her, it was normal. After all, she and Kevin were legally married. As she thought more about it, her body became even tenser, almost completely stiff. Perhaps he was aware of Karen's nervousness. Kevin suddenly reached out and rubbed her head. "Karen, although we are married, I will not force you to do something you don't want to do." His voice was still as seductive and pleasant as usual, but Karen faintly heard laughter in it, and her ears turned red for a moment. Can this man not be so considerate? With his words, Karen's nerves slowly relaxed, and she soon fell asleep. When she woke up, it was already bright. Karen grabbed her phone and looked at the time. She couldn't help but shout in a low voice, "Shit!" At 7 in the morning from Monday to Friday, her alarm clock had always rung on time. Had she slept too deeply and not hear anything? "You're awake," Kevin's low and sexy voice sounded in the room. "I think it's still early, so I turned off your alarm clock and let you sleep in a little longer." Upon hearing Kevin's voice, Karen suddenly realized that there was another person in the room. She looked up and saw Kevin, who was neatly dressed, sitting on the sofa with his slender fingers casually flipping through the newspaper in his hand. It seemed that he had been waiting for her for a long time. "Well, wait for me for a while. I'll make breakfast as soon as possible." Karen scratched her head and jumped out of bed, rushing into the bathroom in a panic. "Breakfast is ready. I'll wait for you to eat together." Behind her came Kevin's deep voice. Karen, for a moment, did not know how to react. Looking at Karen, who was like a frightened rabbit, Kevin's seductive thin lips could not help but raise slightly, and there was a smile in his cool eyes. Was Karen really the shy girl who had scolded him for 3 whole hours 3 years ago? After washing up, Karen came to the dining room. She had changed to her work clothes. She wore a white shirt and a black skirt. The fitted cut outlined her perfect curves. She looked more mature than her actual age. She was very seductive and charming. Seeing this, Kevin's pupils contracted slightly. He looked away and sat down to have breakfast quietly. Kevin made a mental note to himself. His first order of business as the boss of innovative tech was to change the dress code for female employees to wear trousers to work instead of skirts. Seeing the delicious spread on the table, Karen simply smiled and said, "Did you make all these?" Last night, he had told her that he didn't know how to cook, but now he could make such a delicious breakfast so quickly. He was really amazing. Seeing Karen's thoughts, Kevin handed her some warm milk and said quickly, "My servant from home sent this." Kevin was a picky eater. He didn't usually eat outside, so the servant responsible for his daily meals always prepared in advance. "It looks delicious." Karen sat down and took a bite. "It's really delicious." The toast melted in her mouth, leaving a delicious taste, much better than she had imagined. "Okay," Kevin said quietly and did not speak further. He looked very cold. Since he did not speak, Karen did not speak as well. She picked up a piece of toast and put it in her mouth. After eating another piece, she glanced at Kevin quietly. He looked so elegant while he ate, he could have passed as British nobility. He did not do it on purpose, but all his actions were extremely elegant. "Is there something on my face?" Kevin suddenly asked doubtfully. No. She had been caught staring. She blushed again and quickly lowered her head to her breakfast. "If you like breakfast, I'll ask someone to prepare it in the future." After a long time, Kevin finally spoke. Karen felt a little guilty. "Well, you don't have to trouble yourself." Kevin put down his fork, picked up a paper towel to wipe his mouth, and said lightly, "You're my wife." "Oh, okay." Karen did not refuse. His reasoning made her heart soft. She was his wife indeed, and he was her husband. They would be husband and wife for the rest of their lives. While eating the delicious toast and drinking warm milk, she couldn't help but think that God was still treating her well. He had blocked her way to happiness, but still left her an open window. Chapter 6. The Tall and Cool Big Boss. Gossip was a terrifying thing. It was something that Karen had experienced firsthand. If the company's colleagues had seen her going to work in the new boss's car, she would be slashed to death by all kinds of rumors. So, when Kevin asked her to go to work with him in his car, she shook her head and refused without thinking. Although she didn't take his car, they arrived at the company at almost the same time. Karen and a group of people were waiting for the elevator. Kevin, surrounded by 2 special assistants, walked to his exclusive elevator as the company's boss. She wanted to pretend not to see him, but she felt that it was inappropriate to ignore him completely. So she followed suit when the group of people around her greeted politely. "Director Kevin, good morning." "Good morning," Kevin answered indifferently. He glanced around and stepped into the elevator, turning his back on them coldly. Kevin's indifference did not ruin their enthusiasm, and they were talking about him eagerly. Karen did not participate in the discussion, but felt a little funny in her heart. Kevin's style of separating work and personal life was very obvious. At this time, she thought of a popular phrase to describe Kevin: the prince of suppressed lust. As soon as she entered the office, she decided to forget about her relationship with Kevin completely and devoted herself to her work. Recently, Karen and several colleagues from the same department had been busy preparing for the bidding of Star Glow Corporation. As the bidding date loomed closer, Karen's work entered a state of tension. When she was busy, she sometimes even had no time to eat lunch. In the company, Karen was known as a workaholic. It was common for her to work straight through without eating, but no one really cared about her. Today, while Karen was in the middle of something, she received a call from Kevin. Karen looked around and saw that there was no one there. Then she picked up the phone carefully. "What's the matter?" She felt that he should not call her when she was in the company, as this may let slip the relationship to others. Obviously, Kevin did not expect Karen to answer this way. After a pause, he said, "Work is important, but we should still eat." His voice was still light, but it sounded very concerned. Karen blushed and said, "All right, I know." On the other side of the phone, Kevin did not speak. Karen also did not know what else to say. After saying goodbye, she was about to hang up the phone. At the last moment, Kevin said, "I'm in room 1808, Billionaire restaurant." Karen nodded instinctively. "Then you should eat. I won't bother you." "Karen?" Kevin's tone was obviously a little heavy. After a few seconds, he said, "I'll wait for you." "There's no need." Karen instinctively refused, but before she could finish, he had already hung up. Looking at the dark screen on her phone, Karen frowned slightly and sighed helplessly. What reason did she have to refuse lunch with her new husband? Billionaire restaurant was a 5-star restaurant near the office, which was very expensive. Karen did not usually go there unless the company was treating important clients to meals. When she arrived at the restaurant, Karen tried to avoid being recognized, but who would have known that she immediately ran into Kevin's special assistant, Amelia Gray. Karen pretended not to see her, but Amelia stopped her. "Miss Karen, Director Kevin asked me to pick you up." She smiled embarrassedly and quickly caught up with Amelia. She and Kevin were a legal couple, but now they looked like they were having an affair. It was really embarrassing. When they came to room number 1808, Karen saw that Kevin's other special assistant, Nick Black, was also present. Kevin moved to take Karen's coat and hung it on the hanger beside him. He pulled out a chair for her. He then said, "Amelia and Nick have been working with me for many years, and they know everything about us." Karen nodded and did not speak. She just glanced over at the pair of assistants. They nodded politely back at her. Without saying anything, they left the room together. Kevin took a bowl of soup and handed it to Karen. "I've been involved in quite some businesses these years, so I need some people to assist me." Hearing his explanation, Karen smiled shyly at him. "Well, I can understand." The breakfast was sent by servant from his home. Elites like Nick and Amelia were just his assistants. Kevin's background was probably more complicated than Karen had imagined. Karen didn't want to get to the bottom of this. After all, she had already agreed to marry him. She just felt that this person felt good, and not because of his family background. Karen did not say much, so Kevin did not speak much. The two of them ate in silence. Moreover, Kevin had been taught not to talk during meals since he was a child, so he was not used to talking at the table. The meal was very quiet. When they both put down their forks, Kevin said lightly, "You have to eat no matter how busy you are at work in the future." Karen nodded. "I will." Hearing her perfunctory answer, Kevin's eyes darkened under his gold-rimmed glasses. Obviously, he was dissatisfied and said, "Come with me for lunch in the future." Kevin's tone was somewhat overbearing, but Karen was not displeased. She looked up and smiled at him. "Thank you for your concern, Director Kevin, but—" "Director Kevin?" Kevin raised his eyebrows. "Since you have called me Director Kevin, won't you want to listen to what I, as your new boss, demand of you?" This man had used his identity to control her so quickly. Karen had been working at Innovative Tech for 3 years. She was usually a smart person, but now she really didn't know how to deal with Kevin. Kevin took the opportunity to continue. "This needs to be changed." Karen didn't want to meet Kevin for lunch every day, but she really couldn't find an excuse to refuse, so she had to nod and agree. She then borrowed a weak excuse to escape in a hurry. Looking at Karen leaving hurriedly, Kevin's eyes darkened slightly, and his slender fingers tapped on the table subconsciously, as if he was planning something. "Young master," a woman, who looked to be in her 40s or 50s, knocked on the door and interrupted Kevin's thoughts. Kevin looked up, and his eyes were cold. "What's the matter?" The woman said, "Do you like these dishes?" Kevin was a picky eater, so he hardly ate outside. However, this restaurant was part of his empire. His subordinates had set up this elegant private room according to his preferences. Surely, someone would have to serve him and prepare his meals. This woman had been responsible for Kevin's meals since he was a child. She knew his taste buds best. "Prepare 2 Sichuan dishes for each meal in the future, but nothing too spicy." Kevin did not answer her, but gave her this order instead. He preferred bland food, but Karen liked them spicy. She had never told him this, but Kevin had always known. Chapter 7. I Get Jealous. Walking out of the restaurant, Karen looked around guiltily. She was relieved after looking around and did not see anyone she knew. She had just eaten lunch with her husband, and now she was worried that others would see her. When she thought about it, she felt that it seemed ridiculous. Karen sighed helplessly. If she had known that Kevin would become the new boss of Innovative Tech, would she have married him so quickly? Karen could not think of an answer, so she didn't want to think too much about it. Back at the office, she received a notice from the department manager. He had requested several colleagues who were in charge of Starglow Corporation's bid to begin preparations. The boss would like to see a brief of this project in the afternoon. Starglow was a game-developing company and also a subsidiary of Gook Corp, a famous conglomerate. Gook Corp was one of the largest businesses in the country. Even if they wanted to work with them, it was not easy to win a tender among dozens of bidding companies. Starglow's bid was the focus of Innovative Tech this year. Kevin had just taken up the position as head of the company, so it was natural that he paid more attention to the progress of this project. However, Karen felt a little uncomfortable about this. Kevin's words had disturbed her at noon, and now she had to work on a project with him in the afternoon. She was worried that her work would be affected by his presence. Karen and her colleagues arrived at the meeting room in advance. They had also prepared all the necessary materials, but they still worried about it. "Karen," May whispered in Karen's ear, "everybody knows what you are capable of. Don't worry too much." Karen smiled, but said nothing. May was also one of the project team members, but she was a sweet-talking girl who hated hard work. Therefore, Karen was always tasked with many things, and May was always only assigned to help her. William Baker, another colleague, leaned closer to Karen and said, "Karen, you led this project. Don't worry, nothing will go wrong." Karen said, "Still, it is always good to be cautious." Karen was the head of the project team. Her responsibility was the biggest. Of course, she would be more worried than others. Moreover, this project was the first project that Karen had taken on after Kevin began his term as their boss. In addition to achieving her goals at work, she also wanted to impress her husband. In the future, she would be living with Kevin, and she did not want to be underestimated by him. "Director Kevin!" someone exclaimed suddenly, and everyone immediately looked at the door of the conference room, including Karen. She looked up and saw Kevin walking in gracefully with two assistants by his side. During lunch, Kevin had been wearing casual clothes. Now, he had changed into a custom-made silver suit with a white shirt and had also put on a blue and white striped tie, which made him emanate an air of coolness. "Good afternoon, Director Kevin." Everyone stood up and greeted Kevin. "Please, sit down," Kevin said lightly and sat down on the main seat. Then he motioned for Nick to start the meeting. Kevin was no longer looking at Karen, so she felt relieved. In fact, since yesterday, he had practiced the separation of work and personal life much better than she did. As the head of the project, she began to present the details of the project. As a hard-working person, much of the preparation was done personally by Karen. Hence, when she presented the analysis to the group of executives, including the boss, she was not nervous at all. She was not only calm, but her performance was outstanding. At the end of her presentation, Karen received a round of applause. Just as she bowed slightly to thank them, she felt a pair of suspicious eyes looking at her. She looked up and met Kevin's unfathomable eyes. Seeing Karen meet his eyes, Kevin smiled at her. His polite smile was impeccable. It was pure politeness and without personal feelings. Karen immediately returned his polite smile. Being a new boss, Kevin had a cool look on his face. He looked like someone who was not from this world, giving people a feeling of distance. Everyone felt a little nervous around him. Fortunately, Karen was fully prepared for the meeting. Kevin also agreed that the group's work was commendable. When the meeting ended, the team members were very excited and had forgotten about the executives around them for a moment. They chattered as they walked. William put one hand on Karen's shoulder and said, "Karen, if we win the Starglow project this time, it would be glorious." Karen was also happy about this. For a moment, she did not notice how close William had moved towards her. She smiled and nodded. "As long as we work together, we can achieve anything." "Karen?" Suddenly, Kevin's low voice came from behind, and she stiffened immediately. She turned back and politely asked, "Director Kevin, are you looking for me?" "Karen, you're the head of the Starglow project team. Director Kevin still has some details to ask you about." It was not Kevin who spoke this time, but Amelia Gray, who was following her, who had spoken. Amelia had worked under Kevin for many years, so she knew exactly what he was thinking. The boss was looking for Karen to understand more about the project, and the other team members were also smart enough to find an excuse to slip away and leave Karen alone with him. Kevin approached her. "Karen?" Karen subconsciously took 2 steps back to keep a distance from him. "Director Kevin, can I help you with something?" Kevin approached her again. "Right now, I'm only Kevin, your husband." Karen retreated further and looked around. Director Kevin, we are still at work. Hearing her words, Kevin frowned slightly and narrowed his eyes under his gold-rimmed glasses. He was a little angry. However, he had been brought up not to throw his temper easily. After a while, he said solemnly, Karen, although I know that you have nothing to do with that man, I was still jealous when I saw him holding you so closely. Karen obviously did not expect that he would say such a thing. For a moment, her face was hot and red. Finally, she pressed her lips together and smiled. Director Kevin, don't worry, it will never happen again. Director Kevin? Kevin narrowed his eyes again. He was really angry now. Director Kevin, you must be busy. I'll leave now. Karen did not know that she had angered him, so she turned around and left. Kevin watched her enter the elevator, and his cold eyes grew even colder. Director Kevin, there are still a few documents for you to view, Amelia reminded him. Kevin walked to his office and said coldly, Must all of you women act so strong? Chapter 8. No Foundation in Relationship. Amelia was stunned at his words, and then she reacted. Karen had experienced much hurt and betrayal. She had no one to rely on in the past 3 years. If she wasn't strong, how would she survive? Kevin stopped and turned to look at her darkly. Amelia added immediately, But she has you to take care of her in the future. The meeting room was on the 23rd floor, and the sales department was on the 19th floor. When the elevator reached the 22nd floor, the door opened, and Madonna from the public relations department walked in. Karen didn't like people like Madonna, so she stood aside and didn't greet her. Madonna glanced at Karen, turned her head towards the elevator door, and said with her head up, Some people think that by moving to a new city, everyone would forget all the bad things that she had ever done. Karen listened to her, but didn't want to waste time on such a woman as Madonna. Her nonchalant attitude irritated Madonna. She turned around and glared at Karen. Karen, don't you know that our boss is married? Karen pursed her lips and chuckled. If she didn't know that Kevin was married, who else would? Madonna wanted to hook up with Kevin, so she figured Karen would think the same way. She said, The boss has asked Special Assistant Gray to send an internal email early this morning. He announced to the whole company that he is a married man. Karen was busy with the bidding of Starglow Corporation, so busy that she didn't read the internal emails that day. She really didn't know about it. Now that she knew it, she could not help but feel a trace of sweetness in her heart. Kevin had said that when he saw other men being close to her, he would be jealous, and further to that, he had already declared to everyone that he was a married man to prevent any unwanted attention. Thinking of this, Karen felt happy deep in her heart. She couldn't help but start laughing. Madonna was having an unrealistic fantasy about Kevin, but when she saw his email in the morning, her heart sank. She felt depressed for more than half a day, and she wanted someone else to wallow in sadness with her. As soon as the idea popped into her mind, she thought of Karen. She had expected Karen to be bitter about the news too, but she didn't expect that Karen would have such a calm expression, and this made her really angry. Madonna was so angry, she stomped her foot hard. She gritted her teeth and thought, I can't do anything to Karen now, but someday I will get hold of her weakness and bring down her arrogance. Learning from her experiences the previous day, Karen did not delay her returning home and left the office as soon as possible after work. She hoped that she could prepare a good meal before Kevin got off work so that he would not go hungry. When she went to the supermarket to buy some ingredients, she called him on the phone. When she called, Kevin was holding an emergency meeting with several high-ranking executives. He raised his hand and motioned for everyone to be quiet. Then he picked up the phone and asked, "What's the matter?" Karen said, "I'm at the supermarket. Do you have anything you like to eat?" He replied calmly, "I'm not picky about food. It's up to you." When Kevin said this, Amelia and Nick were standing next to him. When they heard what he had said, they exchanged glances. If he wasn't picky, then no one else was. When Kevin returned home, Karen was busy in the kitchen. She was wearing an apron, with her long black hair casually tied up, exposing her fair neck. She was stir-frying with a spatula in her hand. Seeing her like this, it was not hard to imagine that she was also so excellent at work. Kevin stared blankly at her for a long time before he went over to the kitchen. "Karen, I'm back." Karen turned around and smiled faintly. "You can change your clothes first. We'll have dinner soon." Kevin stood still. "Karen?" Karen did not stop moving her hands. She looked back at him and asked, "What's wrong?" "I'm going to change my clothes." Kevin had wanted to say to her that there's no need to cook after a long day at work, that he could ask a cook to prepare their meals. But in his mind, he thought, perhaps food made by his wife would be good too. His vision of home was that when he gets home after work, he could eat the hot dishes made personally by his wife, instead of all meals being prepared with the help of the cook. Karen prepared 3 dishes and 1 soup, namely steamed chicken, fried pork with onions, fried lotus root slices, and enoki mushroom soup. At noon, she had seen Kevin choosing to eat lighter dishes. She guessed that he liked food this way, so she made her home-cooked dishes this way. Kevin changed his clothes and returned to the kitchen. The dishes had been served on the table. Seeing onions being served, he frowned slightly, but immediately acted as nothing had happened. Karen did not notice him. Karen served him a bowl of soup and said, "You've been busy for a whole day. Have a bowl of soup now." "Okay." Kevin took the bowl and took a sip. Karen scooped some onions into his bowl. "Onions are good for health. You'd better eat more." "Okay," Kevin nodded. However, he did not eat them immediately, but slowly drank the soup. He drank one bowl after another. He also ate a few slices of chicken and some lotus root slices, but didn't touch the bowl of rice with onions. As soon as she noticed this, she lowered her head and ate large mouthfuls of rice. She felt a little bitter. Karen did not speak again, as Kevin did not like to talk at the dinner table. The atmosphere was very quiet. After dinner, Kevin was responsible for washing dishes. Without saying anything, Karen went straight back to her room. She knew that her relationship with Kevin was not that close, but when she saw how he was disgusted by her dishes, she still couldn't help but feel sad. But on second thought, their marriage was one not built on emotions. It was just simply so that they could be married. Although they were husband and wife, they didn't know each other well. They did not even scoop dishes for each other as normal couples would do. She was too careless this time. In the future, she would try her best to treat him like a guest in her daily life. She would never cross the line again. After thinking it through, Karen stopped thinking about it. She turned on her computer and was ready to check through the plans for the Starglow project. Friday will be the day of the tender. Everybody had prepared for this for so long. She could not afford any mistakes. Karen clicked on a folder, but then her phone rang beside her. She looked at the phone and saw that it was Faye Reed, her best friend. When she answered the phone, she heard Faye's furious voice. "You little bitch! Where have you been? Why didn't you tell me that you've moved? Are you trying to scare me to death?" Faye was both her high school and college classmate. When Karen left home, Faye was the only person she had. Karen had decided to work in Chatterton Town, and Faye had picked up a suitcase without thinking and immediately left with Karen, bound for Chatterton Town. She was worried that Karen would do something stupid while alone. Hence, she wanted to accompany Karen for 2 months and then return home after Karen settled down. Chapter 9. Female Friend. But in the end, they felt that Chatterton was not too bad, so Faye settled down there with Karen. Then they pooled their money and opened a bridal wear design studio. But Karen needed money. To be precise, she felt that she couldn't rely on anyone, not even those closest to her. Only money could give her a sense of security. She needed more work to make money, so she applied to join innovative tech. That was how Karen came to only serve as a passive investor of the design studio and no longer managed its operations. But Faye knew that this was not the only reason. The real reason was that Karen was no longer willing to design wedding dresses. Hence, she wanted a job that was completely different from that. It was a wound buried in the deepest part of her heart. Until now, no one could help her to get rid of the scar in her heart. In front of Faye, Karen had no secrets at all. It was Faye who had arranged the blind date between Karen and Kevin. She wanted to ask Faye out this weekend to tell her everything, that she had married Kevin. But she didn't expect that Faye had already gone to her rented apartment to look for her so soon. Karen listened quietly. After Faye had finished yelling, she said softly, "Faye, don't worry, I'm fine. The Starglow project will be over on Friday. I'll treat you to dinner this weekend." Faye shouted in a flustered tone, "Bitch, you scared me to death! Do you think that a meal can make up for my mental damage?" Karen knew that Faye was a sharp-tongued person. She couldn't help but smile, and she said, "How about I sleep with you for a night to compensate you?" Kevin had just pushed open the door and entered. He paused slightly and trying to figure out who Karen was talking to. Although Karen usually smiled and seemed to be close to everyone, the reality was the only person who could really get close to her was Faye Reed. Kevin knew all this, but Karen did not know that he knew. She quickly muted herself on the phone and whispered to him, "This is a female friend of mine." No matter if they were in love or not, she would never do anything that would make Kevin jealous. Kevin nodded and did not ask more questions. He left thoughtfully to give her some space to continue her chat. However, Karen thought that Kevin did not believe her. She pursed her lips and smiled helplessly. Perhaps he thought of her as promiscuous. "Karen? Karen!" Faye, on the other end of the phone, roared again. "Tell me your address and I'll go to find you." Karen knew that Faye was worried about her. If she didn't convince Faye that she was fine by today, Faye would definitely call the police to report a missing person. Karen smiled gently and said, "Stop it. I'll go and find you." Hanging up the phone, Karen packed up and prepared to stay over at Faye's place for a night. She wanted to tell her about the marriage, honestly. She knocked on the door of the study. When she heard Kevin say, "Enter," she pushed the door open and walked in. "Kevin, I'm going over to my friend Faye's place tonight. I won't come back until tomorrow." Kevin immediately got up and said, "I'll drive you there." Karen shook her head. "It's all right, don't bother." Kevin stared at her. "It's too late. I'm worried about you going out alone." His tone was tough and direct, making it hard for Karen to refuse. Kevin's car was a Land Rover. For people like him, it was not expensive, and it was spacious and comfortable. Kevin's driving was very steady, just like his personality. Kevin asked about Faye's address. After Karen told him, they didn't talk anymore. It took almost an hour to reach the destination, just as Karen was thanking Kevin for the ride and was about to open the car door. Kevin reached out and grabbed her. "Karen?" His voice was low and sexy. When he called her name, it was always so pleasant. Karen glanced at his hand and raised her head to look at him. She asked softly, "Is there anything else?" He loosened his hands and said uncomfortably, "Are you angry?" Karen laughed. "Why should I be angry?" Kevin was speechless. He did not reply. Karen pushed the door open and got out of the car. She stood outside and said, "Go back quickly. Drive safe." Kevin nodded and started the car. After looking at his car drive away for a distance, Karen turned around and walked towards the residential area where Faye lived. When they first arrived in Chatterton, Karen and Faye lived together with 2 private rooms and sharing 1 living room. Later, she had switched to work at Innovative Tech. Because it was too far away, she moved nearer to the company, renting a place. After Karen moved away, Faye had left Karen's room empty. In Faye's mind, she wanted to allow Karen a space to return to at any time. Seeing Karen appearing in front of her, Faye ignored her and continued watching a TV show on her iPad. Faye was ignoring her, but someone else didn't. A handsome dog that looked like a snowball rushed to Karen's feet, kissing them while wagging its tail. Obviously, it was very happy. Karen threw her bag down casually and picked up the little fellow. "Momo, do you miss Mommy?" The dog squealed twice and struggled into Karen's arms, showing how much it missed its mother. Faye glared at it with dissatisfaction. "Momo, you ungrateful little fellow. Although you're her baby, I've spent more time raising you than she ever did. It's okay if you don't kiss me, but you don't have to show off your love in front of me." Karen sat beside Faye with her arms around her and said proudly, "Momo is a smart girl. She knows who her real mother is and who her stepmother is." "I'm the stepmother?" Faye threw the iPad away and held on to Karen menacingly. "Little girl, be careful. I will poison your daughter." Karen hadn't even said anything, but Momo began to bark, expressing her dissatisfaction at Faye's words. Seeing such an adorable Momo, Karen was very amused. She lifted her hand and rubbed Momo's face. "My daughter is most considerate of me." Faye rolled her eyes at Karen. "If you want a daughter, you can marry a man. You can have as many as you want." Karen looked at her and suddenly said very seriously, "Faye, I am married." "Get out!" Faye pointed at the door, but soon realized that Karen would not joke with her like this. She opened her mouth wide enough to swallow an egg. After a long time, she said, "Who is he?" Karen said, "It's the man, Kevin Kyle, that you introduced me to the last time." "Kevin Kyle?" Faye scratched her head and tried to recall the name for a very long time to no avail. "I've never introduced you to someone called Kevin Kyle."